Sometimes the opportunities that scare us the most are the ones we can't stop thinking about, and sometimes they lead us somewhere unexpected. In this episode, we're talking about frequently asked questions about a career change that both of us have in common, the reasons behind our career moves, the highs and lows along the way, and where we're off to next.
Michelle, it is June. The school year has wrapped. It is summer. How are you feeling, girl?
Pretty good, pretty good. I feel like I headed into summer feeling a little bit better than normal this year, having pre-planned some of my recuperation and relaxation pieces before summer hit. So I'm feeling pretty good, but I won't lie, I've required a lot of rest too.
It takes a while. Every year it just smacks you in the face in a way, right? And I don't think that perhaps if you aren't in this role of education, you understand that fully. Even though I did take your advice as well and I front loaded a little bit. I wish I had your advice maybe way earlier because I had to try to fit everything into the last 2 weeks. But yeah, I did have a massage and I continued with my workout routine and just trying to ease into that summer. But no matter what, I think next year, obviously, I'm going to be so much better at that and winding down a little bit sooner. But now that it's here and your day to day craziness just stops, it is a lot to get used to. Your days are slower. You don't maybe have as much planned. And even though there's still lots that you want to accomplish and do, it's almost a to do list to prioritize rest.
Oh,
So
true.
they talk so much about what we want to do on our bucket list and how we're going to rejuvenate and rest this summer. But it's like, okay, we're here. We've said this. We know what we should be doing. But it's almost another thing to think about how to unwind. But I will say I'm very grateful. Don't get me wrong. And I do look forward to the coming summer.
So true, Nicole. And I think it's such an emotional roller coaster, right? So we're trying to prioritize rest and already enjoy our summer, but the end of the year is such a high and low when it comes to emotions and saying goodbye to our kids and our team members and all of that. Today, we're going to dive right in to one of the questions that we get asked the most frequently. As many people know, Nicole and I were both administrators in our respective elementary schools, and we get asked this question a lot. And so we thought today we would share all about our journey into administration and what that was all about.
Our journey into administration, as you said, is a huge conversation that people have with me all the time. And new listeners have reached out to ask the question of like how we both got into administration, but then uniquely how we both exited back into the classroom. So I love hearing your journey and I know you inspired mine as people will learn. So yeah, how did you get into administration, Michelle? Because you were the first one in before me.
I went into administration only after a few years of teaching. I often refer to me saying that I was a baby when I went in. I had taught kindergarten and I had taught grade one. I had been asked to be an instructional coach for a few of the teachers on the staff. I really loved that position, being in other people's classrooms, supporting them with their teaching and with their classroom management and all the aspects of teaching and learning. And then my associate principal was going on maternity leave. And so people were encouraging me to apply. I had just begun my master's a few months before, and I was young. I was just a baby. And so I applied and was the successful candidate and stepped into that AP role. I loved serving and supporting the teachers in the school to help them to be successful. I loved the vision of the entire school, not just our campus, but the whole system, working together with our admin team. All of those aspects of it were incredible. As like teaching, administration is a busy time, but it's very rewarding. And I just loved being a part of the growth and success of our organization. How about you, Nicole?
Yeah, so I taught for over 10 years prior to going to administration, and it was never, ever on my radar. If you would have asked me when I first became a teacher, I would be like, there's no way I'm going into administration. However, I kind of just in a way fell into it, but in a really, really positive way. I had left a previous school of mine to follow a principal that I admired and was a mentor to me. And so after being at the new school with her for a few years, there was an opportunity to be in an acting assistant principal role. And I was a learning leader at the time. And so doing quite a bit of instructional coaching alongside teachers already in classrooms. And so it was a natural transition for me to step into that acting role because it was only for 6 weeks. When I stepped into that acting role, albeit very nervous, I took to it right away. I loved, as you said, being with teachers. I loved being able to support them in ways that they needed. Because I was just coming out of a classroom, wanted to support them in the ways that I felt like I needed as a teacher. And so I loved being just in their rooms. I loved being in the hallways with them. I loved supporting in various capacities. And then when I returned to the classroom after that 6 week stint, I found this calling to perhaps maybe pursue that. I already had my master's degree completed, so I knew I could apply for other roles. And it just so happened that our assistant principal at the time, at the end of that year, received a principalship at a different school, which meant her role opened up. And then my principal, of course, came to me right away, almost like running down the hallway, coming into my classroom and saying, Nicole, you have to apply for this position. Like, I would love to work alongside you as a co-team. I would mentor you. And I guess the rest is history. I applied for that position. I applied for a couple other positions actually that same year, but I was lucky enough to receive the position at my current school, which was unique in its own because I was a teacher there, I was a learning leader there. So many of my friends were there, and now I was stepping into a completely different role within that admin team. However, it was a really easy transition in a way too, because I knew all the families, I did know the staff, and I did know what kind of teachers were wanting from their administration at that time.
Our stories are so similar, and I love hearing you share yours again. I think when you and I became neighbors, you had been in the role for just a couple of years at that time. And I remember how excited we were that we had that in common. I also stepped into the associate principal role within the school where I had taught as well, which does come with its unique gifts and challenges. I was in a similar situation where I had been there, I knew the families, I felt that I was really respected in that role and could offer so much to the staff and families there. Down the road, probably about 9 years in to my journey as an associate principal, I felt a niggle, I would say, a nudge to perhaps return back into the classroom. And I was very openly talking to my admin partner at the time about it. She supported whatever I decided to do. I had felt as though I had, of course, loved my time in the classroom, but I felt like I hadn't had enough experience. And after the time in administration, I felt this calling to go back. And I remember it was a hard decision. I remember humming and hawing and talking to you about it on our morning walk and talks and talking with my family about it. Not really sure what to do because I didn't want to leave this position in administration that I loved, but I felt this calling to go back and teach literacy and numeracy and get better with my classroom management and do all of those things and remind myself what it's like to be in the classroom. Um, I went to my superintendent and I asked him for a 1 year leave of absence. He looked at me and he said, Michelle, nobody's ever asked me for this before. And I felt so strongly about my request that I said, can you put me down as the first? I think it will make me a better teacher, ultimately a better administrator again someday. And he granted me that leave. And so I returned to the classroom and I have been back in the classroom for the last 7 years.
And because of that shift in your life, you really gave me permission to do the exact thing that I was feeling, even though it was a few years later. And so I was the assistant principal at two schools. So after about year two at my new school, I had been in administration for just over 6 years. And I started to think about the same exact thing. I was really missing being in the classroom, immersed with the learning. And there had been a huge shift, and there was a big shift coming because in Alberta we had new curriculum that was coming down. And so I thought for me it was probably the perfect timing to get in again to a classroom to really know what was, the expectation of our teaching staff. However, I was so nervous, but actually I was more scared than anything, and I was more fearful of what people would think and say about my decision. And so I quietly held that decision in my heart for well over a year. Besides you and, my husband and my immediate family and friends, but I didn't tell anybody at work or my principal or my upper admin team what I was thinking. And then I had a conversation with my dad one day and I was telling him about this because he's just one of those people that I knew I could go to for some advice. And I knew he was so excited that I had got my master's and I had gone to administration. And kind of the next step for me was going to be a principal. That there have been lots of talks about that with myself and with some of my admin partners. However, I just felt this calling to come back to the classroom. And so I had talked to my dad about it. And he said, if you could remove everybody else's opinions and thoughts, what would your immediate decision be? And I was like, I would be stepping into the classroom yesterday. And he's like, then there you have it. That's your decision. You have to, live this life for you. And if that's what you're thinking that you need to do, then do it. And it was like this magical switch of being like, yeah, what am I waiting for? However, I was, of course, apprehensive to talk to people about it. But when I talked to my principal about it, although she was surprised and not wanting me to leave as a her admin partner, she was very supportive of if that's what I wanted, that she would find a way to make it happen. And then same thing, I talked with my director, who I had been talking to about possibly applying for the principalship pool in my district. So I know that he was shocked and surprised and asked me to take some time to think about it, which I did. But I knew the answer. So when I went back to him and explained that I was wanting to head back into the classroom, he understood and helped me get to the next school that I was going at, which actually ended up in me opening a brand new elementary school, which was a cool experience that I have always wanted to do. So it was the right fit, it was the right timing, and I love currently still being back in the classroom. There's a lot of parallels that I can draw from both roles, but I definitely can say that I am a stronger teacher after being an administrator and now seeing the other side and being back into the role that I'm in right now. What were some of the things that you loved about being in administration, Michelle?
I loved being part of the big picture. I loved being part of the admin team at our central office level. I loved supporting teachers, being in classrooms as much as I could be, although we know how challenging that is with all of the other demands of the job. I loved listening to the kids and listening to their perspective about their learning journeys and being able to support the teachers in helping those kids to be successful. I loved getting to know the families and being able to support them. Everybody has a story. I think that is important to listen to. But ultimately, of course, you and I know we both went into administration to support the teachers. A couple of things, Nicole, I was thinking about when you mentioned your dad. My mom and dad, of course, were a huge part of my decision making as well. And when I stepped out of administration, the very next year is when my dad became sick. And I think, I don't know, it felt like the universe had timed my leave at a good time. But also, I stepped out of administration right before the pandemic hit. And I remember when we were at home and the government announced that the schools were going to be shut down, my husband yelled, "Early spring break." He was so excited for us that we had extra time off as a family. And I literally put my head in the pillows and started to cry. And he looked at me and he said, "Aren't you so glad that you stepped out of administration?" Because it was literally the year before. And I cried harder. I said, "No, I am not." I said, "I feel helpless. I feel like I need to be there." I wanted to help. He thought I was crazy. But I know that those first couple of years of stepping out of that bigger picture aspect, that was an interesting transition to stay in my own lane, stay with my team, stay in the classroom. It was all an interesting time.
It was certainly an interesting time because I was still in administration during the pandemic and we had to go into the school every day. We weren't at home as administrators. We were there at the school mostly to honestly, once again, to support teachers in the best way we could, even though I felt completely helpless. That is one time in my career that I felt like I couldn't do enough because people weren't in front of me. I was helping with tech, yes. I was helping cover classrooms when people were sick themselves online. I was helping with the day to day of parents calling into the school, but it wasn't working alongside teachers anymore. And I felt like really my hands were tied in so many ways because there was certain things that we knew that they had to be doing at home. They weren't able to come into the school. It was a lot of trying to bridge that school and community during that time, and I found that really difficult because you just that face-to-face element, you miss a huge part of it, right? So how can you keep your school connected when you're still at home? So, yeah, that was a challenging part for teachers, of course, a challenging part for administrators, for families. It was a wild time for sure. When I was not during COVID, when it was not the pandemic and I was in administration, I just loved the ability to be able to amplify impact. So even though I loved my classroom of, let's say, 25-ish students, I knew that if I could infuse myself into the culture and classrooms of the school, that I could amplify that impact as administrator a little bit more and drive that systematic change from that big picture lens. When I came back into the classroom, that was still my goal, was to amplify change, not just in my own classroom, but through that systematic change. That's when I love to invite people into my classroom to see what I was doing. I love to do lunch and learns. I love to conference with teachers to see how I can best support them, especially through that literacy lens that I'm so passionate about. But also, I was seeking out people about things that I wasn't strong in. So I wanted to learn more about the new science and socials curriculum that was coming in. I wanted to know about some more math spiraling that was coming through our district. So it was also me reaching out more to other teachers after I was in administration to see how we truly are a community of so much talent, but sometimes we don't know the talent next door until it's shared with us. So that's what I did learn through administration as well.
You make me think about the gifts that the teachers bring and how people are strong and have strengths in different ways. And you don't know those until you do have the opportunity to be in their classrooms more regularly and see the way that they share their leadership with their students and also with the teams. And I really did enjoy that aspect of it. I remember when I was stepping out of administration, I had already had the conversation and the move was going to proceed. But at the time, my principal educator had to be away. And so my staff didn't know that at the end of that school year, I was going to be stepping out. And I was the acting principal for a good part of the second half of that school year. For quite a few months, I was in the acting principal role. And so I know it came as a shock to people that I was going to step out. And when you said that you worried about what people would think, I remember living with that worry. I didn't want them to think that being in the acting principal role was too difficult for me because my decision had come long before that, but I needed to follow through on this commitment. And I remember wearing my sunglasses, to be honest, to the end of the year assembly because I knew at the end of the year when that was over and I said goodbye to all of the kids and that role that I was just going to cry. And so I just put my sunglasses down. Everybody laughed and cheered, but it was such a fulfilling way to end my time in administration. I love what you said about the bigger picture and the bigger vision. I feel like being in the classroom and then being in administration and then back in the classroom, I feel like I have a better understanding of both sides of the role and a greater sense of empathy for both roles as well.
Yes, back to what you had just said about fear of what people would think as well. That's one thing when I went to my new school, because when I left administration and I took on a teaching role in a brand new school that was opening, I felt this need to tell people why I had left. And that's on me. And I understand that. But I didn't want the whispers and the assumptions, maybe perhaps, of why I had left administration, because it isn't very common. It's not very common, right? If you leave administration off, you are leaving through retirement. You're not leaving to
Mhm.
usually go back to a classroom. And so didn't want people to think that I couldn't cut it as an administrator. And I truly loved that role for the 7 years I was in it. But there was just this calling back into a classroom. And so now I'm much more aware that honestly, nobody else cares as much as I do. People are interested. They want to inquire about why I left, but I don't think that's perhaps their first thought. But that's what I thought people were going to say or think,
Mm.
perhaps. So that's why I always started the conversation. So then people felt like they didn't have to start the conversation. And
Mm.
then once I start talking about it, then I feel really comfortable to explain my reasonings behind that and also my reasonings for why I still love being an administrator, but also why I love being a teacher as well.
Mhm.
What do you love about being back in the classroom?
I would say number one is the community that is able to be developed with a small group of students. I would say that's number one. I'm a highly relational person, and building that community and that classroom, that environment together with the students is just so amazing. I love watching them grow and develop over the year. Every year, I see such an increase in their confidence, their ability to believe in themselves, and to learn more difficult material as the year goes on. I love getting to know the families and creating that tight knit environment. And I love to learn from the families about their kids and converse with the families about what they know as their child as a learner and the social emotional aspect of those kids. I love being on a team of teachers. So at our school, we have 4 teachers per team. I just love that opportunity to work alongside them and how we each bring different strengths to the table, but we collaborate together to make the best learning environment possible for the kids. How about you?
Basically the exact same thing. I really missed having a community that was like built by me only. Not that in a school, you obviously culture is the number one thing that should be built within schools in general. However, I just felt that I missed my own little community, right? My own little team of small little learners, but also my team of adults around me as well. It is just very different when you are in administration. It can be often very isolating, to be honest. That is the truth of administration. Not everybody likes the decisions that you make. As a teacher, I don't always even love the decisions that administration makes, but I can empathize and understand why they've made that, knowing the other side. And I've been sitting on the other side. But I think if you keep what's best for students in mind, as most administrators do, then that's the decisions that I know that I have to back as well as a teacher when my admin now makes some decisions. I also find it just terribly rewarding. I don't know if the word terrible is good, but I find it very rewarding to be back in a classroom and see those little shifts of movement. And I miss that. I miss that when I was out of the classrooms. Those connections that kids make on a daily basis. It's harder to see when you're kind of on the outside looking in. And also just being able to feel like I had my own space again. So sometimes as an administrator, it can be a lot in that your days start at the minute you walk in that door and they don't actually ever end, right? You're always available on your phone. You're always available through text message or email. And it truly is a 24/7 job. Teaching is too, just in a different realm. Right. I find right now I could put a bit more boundaries on my time. Whereas when I was in administration, if a teacher was texting me or calling me, I was dealing with that right away, right? That took priority. And I can put more of a time stop on my emails as a classroom teacher. And my kids, for being completely honest, one of the other shifts of why I went back to the classroom too is that I did feel that my kids were missing out a lot of me, that time with me, because I did live, breathe my administrative role so passionately and deeply for all those 7 years that I missed events, I missed functions, I missed sporting. If my phone rang, I was on it trying to help solve a problem alongside a teacher. And I just felt like I really needed to give more time back to my kids in those teenage years. And who knows? I should never say never. I never said I was going to go into admin in the first place. I didn't think I was ever going to go back into a classroom. And who knows what's going to happen down the road, because I do love that big picture feel of being on the administrative side and maybe one day again. But right now, I'm super happy being back in the classroom.
2 things that you made me think of while you were talking. I remember that first year being back in the classroom, and you are in those 4 walls of the classroom. Yours was a bit different, right? Because you were in more of an open concept team teaching environment. But I remember thinking, when do I go out of here? We are in here all of the time, which was so different from being in administration because I was everywhere within the building. And then all of a sudden, I realized I wasn't seeing the team members throughout the school or the team members down the other hallway because now I was back in my classroom. The other thing that's hit me a couple of times since I've been back in the classroom is, even though I'll get to know the grade ones, especially, they walk by me every day, and some of the kindergartens, if I'm helping out in the gym, kids will come into my classroom for their 10 months of the school year, and some of them I'm meeting for the first time. And a few times I've felt, why am I just getting to know you now? I feel like I wish I had been able to get to know them earlier and not just for these 10 months. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, but I felt, oh, if I was in administration, I would have known you in kindergarten when you came in and a little bit in grade one. And so they come to me in grade two, and I think, oh, I've missed out on a couple of years. So you said never say never. Nicole, you already know my news. I am actually heading back into administration. You are right. Never say never. I can see that happening again someday for you too. I applied for the role of the associate principal again this past spring. It was a tricky decision. I felt like I was ready, but also not sure if I was ready. I didn't have my walk and talk partner, but let me tell you, I walked many kilometers to come to the decision to even put my name in. And then when I decided to put my name in, I felt pretty good about that. I had to update my resume, Nicole, write a cover letter, go for an interview. It was all very nerve-wracking. And in the end, I was offered the position to go back. So, of course, this all comes with mixed feelings again, because I am leaving a team that I love to work with, but I'm also going to be staying with the team in a way because I'll be in the same school again. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity.
What a unique experience for you to have to apply for your old job back. I think I love that though. Your team will be so sad to see you go, but how cool is it for them to see you on the other side, so they say, right? They'll know that you are going to be such a support for not only them, but for your entire school community. And I know that you are a gift to that school already. So this is just going to amplify your impact so much greater, right? And you're going to be the best person to bridge the gap and be able to pull parallels from both teaching and administration, right? Because they are both very tricky, complex, highly emotional, takes a lot of time and energy roles, right? They're just very different. People will always ask us, which one is harder, or which one do you find that has less time commitment or whatnot? And the answer is they're both in different ways. You can't really say that administration or teaching is harder because they're so much more complex in their own right. There's times, hands down, where I would say administration for sure. Like it got the best of me at times. And there's times I'm going to say that as a classroom teacher that it gets the best of me at times, right? I think that they're very complex. They have totally two different roles to them, but a lot of parallels in that crossover. So you're going to be phenomenal in that new role. And what a cool perspective you're going to bring to this podcast too, right? Because I'm still going to be in the trenches, as they say, with kids, and you're going to be in the trenches, as they say, with teachers and families and students. So it'll be cool for you to be able to give that perspective as well to our listeners.
When I told my family that I was going to step back into the role, the first thing my son said to me was, "Mom, what about teachers next door?" And I was like, it was a bit of a gut check, right? Because I was like, "Oh, yeah, of course. Of course, I had thought through all of that." But as an administrator, teachers first, right? As an administrator, you are still a teacher. That teacher part never, ever goes away. I think that can sometimes be a misconception in different environments where perhaps a CEO or an owner of a school, perhaps maybe they weren't a teacher first before they stepped into that. But certainly, most commonly, an administrator is a teacher first. So you bring so many of the parallels to the role, Nicole. You're right. It's not easy to make everybody happy, but if the kids are at the forefront of those decisions and that strategic thinking, the problem solving, I think that's the most important. I know people want to try to make everybody happy, and it is actually impossible in both roles, but with kids at the forefront of those decisions, that's our driving force, right?
Absolutely. And so with you going back into administration, which I'm so excited for you, I am going to be wrapping up my role as an literacy intervention teacher and heading back into a classroom role as a grade three teacher, but also be doing some literacy support as part of that role and some literacy coaching and some mentorship. So I'm really excited. I've taught K to six, but I've never taught grade three, which I love that because then I can say now I've taught the whole realm of elementary school. And because obviously there has been new curriculum in the last 4 years here in Alberta, 5 years now, I'm going to be able to take that on. And I have a team around me already that is supporting me by adding me to the drive and talking through resources. And I'm so excited to be stepping back into a classroom because although I have loved the literacy intervention role this year at my two different locations, I absolutely miss having a community. I still feel like I work with lots of students, I work alongside lots of teachers, but I don't have that tight knit community that I so loved when I went back into the classroom. So I'm excited for that for next year.
I am so excited for you, Nicole. And every time you share where you've been, whether it's been as an AP or a learning leader or a teacher in a classroom, I just think, goodness, wouldn't it be great if someday we had the opportunity to work together? I just think how much my teaching colleagues could benefit from you and how lucky your new team is to have you. And it's wonderful that they've been able to blend this classroom role for you while still maintaining that literacy support. I think that's just going to be fantastic for all of you.
Yes, and now because I'm new in a new district, I'm looking forward to learning so much about the district and how it works and what processes are in place by being in a classroom, because I think that's where I'm going to be able to learn it firsthand and learning from new colleagues, right? I'm already seeing how brilliant the humans I work alongside are, so I can't wait to learn from them. In closing, I just want to wrap up by saying this. Stepping into administration changes how you see a school, and returning to the classroom is where that big picture perspective truly comes to life. It's all about the students, our teaching colleagues, and being part of our school community.
What a beautiful way to kick us off into summer. We hope everybody has a restful and relaxing summer and takes time to rejuvenate. Please send us a message if there's something out of this episode that hit you or made you think about something. If you're possibly navigating a career change, jumping in or out of something, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone, and have a marvelous summer.
Wait, is that the bell? The buses are rolling and we've got duty.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Teachers Next Door podcast. If you enjoyed this week's PD session, do us a solid. Leave a rating, 5 stars preferably, and a review. Think of it as giving us an A+ on our eval. It helps other listeners find their way to our neighborhood. As the kids say, please subscribe.
Do you have a burning question or topic you would like to hear about? Send us an email or message. Be sure to follow us on Instagram for show updates and details on future episodes.
This podcast was produced and edited by us, your teachers next door. No outsourcing here. The reality of all teachers. We do it all.
If nobody else has told you today, just remember, you are doing a great job. Catch you next time.
And we should mention, the ideas we share on this podcast are totally our own.